Hi, and welcome to the Design Find, the podcast. Here we'll be interviewing women in the design field and finding out about their journey and their opportunities now in the design field. Today we have Jennifer, and she's going to be telling us about her experience in design. So welcome, Jennifer.
Yeah, hi, Cole. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
So to start off, could you get everyone a quick bio about yourself so we can be better introduced?
Yeah. So currently I am a Master of Design student at UC Berkeley, and I was formerly a product designer at Dropbox. Ton of people always ask me why on earth would I go back to school when I'm already a designer? And that's because my goal is to go into social entrepreneurship. I have a really crazy passion for working with underserved populations. It's just something that I've done a lot over the course of my life. And I think after working in corporate design at different companies, I just decided I want to do a social impact career. So maybe I'm crazy, but that's what I want to focus on. So now I have a startup that I'm working on that is a mental wellness tool for racial minorities. So
Hey,
that's kind of
talk more about that. That sounds really cool.
Yeah. So kind of what got me into this was because growing up, I had, I think just coming from like the foster youth background was definitely very impactful to my mental health. I didn't really understand how or why until maybe as I got older. And I was really fortunate to find a therapist, although it took like 8 years to find one I really liked. And it's very expensive. It's like $150 per session, some like crazy amount. I'm really fortunate that I was able to find someone I connect with, but I mean, I think that's just not the case for so many people. And I think I realized I want to create more accessible ways of just getting help that's culturally relevant. So that really was my motivation behind this. And I think what's interesting too is like I kind of always pictured myself focusing more on design and maybe working at like a, I don't know, company like Dropbox per se, you're focusing on that. And now as I'm stepping into this startup role where I'm doing everything, focusing more on business and being a founder who is also a designer, I think there could be more of those because I think coming in with a strong design foundation is pretty key to building a business. A lot of times it's really forgotten. So I think going into Berkeley, one of my goals was to come out as a co-founder with this design focus and really bring that to an organization. So I guess it kind of happened like 2 months into grad school. So wild ride it's been.
Wow. So is this like a website or an app you're making?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't fully explain that. It is a subscription-based mobile app. And so we specifically make it convenient, also affordable to get mental wellness resources that are just specific to your cultural upbringing versus something that's like very broad and generalized. And so we'll like personalize the resources, take into account, like, for example, if you're Asian American, or maybe you grew up from like a low income family or an immigrant family, we'll actually give mental health resources specifically to that. And the goal is to partner with clinical psychologists who are also people of color, who like specialize in those topics. So pretty much just getting something approved from like a professional and making it super accessible. I would say a lot of inspiration came from mental health TikTok. That has been blowing up. I think just like short bite-sized videos. Of course, the thing with TikToks, there's like a million videos that you have to browse through. So kind of just streamlining that process, expediting it, making it super fast. And really, I think one of my big goals that I want for this and really bring that human-centered focus is to help people have more self-acceptance. And going back into your past and understanding your cultural upbringing, I think is definitely tough, but I think it's really kind of like the answer. Focusing on self-acceptance, empowerment, and healing from your past and moving forward, that's really what we want for everybody. And I think when you're able to do that, you can accomplish so much. I mean, you have that level of self-acceptance. Maybe your relationships are better. You get the job you want, or you go get to you find other opportunities. I think there's so much that comes out of having a strong mental health foundation.
For sure. If you like yourself, you can like everyone else.
Yeah.
And I think just now it's becoming trendy. But
It is trendy, yes.
But it should have been the thing before, long before. But also, I now see like schools from a young age implementing it, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, now is really the time, and a lot of people. I mean, look at Headspace and Ginger made a merger, which is incredible. I think there's definitely more investment. But one thing that I would really like to see more in the industry is for the mental health care space to just be more equitable for minorities and other like marginalized communities.
Yeah,
And
you have to say that like wellness, like workout, like that whole space, it is very expensive to be like that type of person.
it is expensive, I know, because I pay for it, but I have a really great therapist. So I was really fortunate, but I've heard of some horror stories. I mean, you know, it's just hard to find someone you really like vibe with. So it's like dating. If you go the one-on-one therapy route. Yeah, I think really fusing design with mental health is really unique, because I think mental health itself is not that approachable. It's like, oh man, I got to think about my inner demons or my past. Sometimes people want to avoid that. And I think kind of bringing in my experience in design is trying to figure out, how do we make this more approachable and consumable, when you keep it human centered and make it really meaningful, not, like we're at a doctor's office and we're going to fix you, that's a little bit.
So like what type of design do you usually go for when you're designing for mental health? Like, I don't know, what colors, what shapes, what do you try to like design to make it the most approachable?
Yeah, I could kind of talk about the branding that I've done so far. Maybe because we are focused on racial minorities, that's why the colors are actually meant to emulate the skin tones of racial minorities. So we have like brown, tan, and we try to use earthy colors like natural, self-acceptance. It's kind of the theme or vibe, I would say. I mean, we really want to make this a reflection of the people that we are serving. And that's one way we've tried to use color to really evoke that familiarity.
Can you talk some more about your experience with Dropbox? Because I think everyone like knows what Dropbox is, but they never like think about, oh wait, there's people who design this stuff and there's people behind like this huge company. So could you please like talk to us about how you liked it, what you did there?
Yeah, so at Dropbox, I worked as a product designer for about 2.5 years. So I worked on a bunch of different kinds of products. I worked on Dropbox Sync, so kind of what it's known for, file sync and share. And I think that was particularly interesting in that there wasn't a lot of like graphical design work per se. I think people kind of associate UX or product design with like, I made a box and I have this cool interaction design pattern. Really, I learned how to design for the back end. So just trying to think, okay, when would we trigger this notification? How would this product sync with all these other integrations? So, I mean, it was definitely a different kind of design. I worked on something else that was pretty wild, Dropbox restorations team, hands down, one of the coolest products I've worked on. Turns out people can hold your files and folders for ransom. And I worked on a ransomware product, which is if people hold your files hostage. And so how do we get, it's like learning how to design for people who are just in crazy panic mode, trying to get their things back. So yeah, if you go on Twitter, some people are like, oh my gosh, Dropbox is savior. Or sometimes they're like, I hate Dropbox because I lost everything. So it's like kind of polar opposites. That was quite interesting to work on. The one I was most recently on was Dropbox Sharing. I didn't realize how much Dropbox Sharing would be so impactful to business. And I think when people think of design, we don't always like talk about business impact, but I think Dropbox Sharing was so heavily tied to it because it's this idea of sharing value. The more people you share with, then you bring in more people who aren't Dropbox users and you convert them, and people just use the product more if they share. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I mean, that's one of the top things people do with Dropbox is like literally share. So to work on something that was so core to what Dropbox is was also an amazing time. So definitely like a variety. Some things that were very front end, what you typically think user experiences, like user flows and simplifying flows. But also there was the other side I worked on, whereas like you couldn't see what I designed, but learning to work with engineers and design, like call it like invisible design.
So what do you think your best like design experience you have done, or what's the best thing you've designed?
Yeah, I think when people ask me this question, I think they expect me to say something from Dropbox, but it's actually not. The work that I am most proud of is actually this nonprofit that I worked on. I because for me, I coming from a foster youth background, it's always been super. I mean, it's pretty super core to my life. Actually, how I got into design was starting a nonprofit for foster care. Didn't work out, so I worked for this nonprofit family agency called Angels Foster Care. And so my goal for this website design, I mean, it was crazy. Redesign the branding, the logo, the website design, and our goal was to get more people to foster babies because there's a shortage of foster parents, and trying to figure out a way using design to get people to understand the purpose of fostering, how to do it. And I think prior to that, there was a huge lack of transparency on what that process even was like. And I think why I'm really proud of this project is because it was just a massive amount of effort. I worked a little bit on the coding of it. I mean, I did a lot of project management. I was a product manager. I managed a team. I did everything from even thinking about how do we think about the content that we put on the page. And so one example of this is they were using stock photos, which had primarily white babies and just white families. There was a lack of diversity. And so we thought, well, how can we more so elevate design to reflect the people that we actually serve? Foster babies come from all different kinds of ethnicities, and families are multicultural. And so I got my friends, found a fake baby doll from Amazon. Yeah, I got outfits, I coordinated the outfits, we took photos, professional photos, photo edited them, and then put it on the website. So those are things that, for example, like I don't think that I would have gone to do at Dropbox or other corporate companies, but for this nonprofit, it was so meaningful to me, like the sheer amount of effort to do all of this, to create this end redesign. And then there was like a 15% reduction in bounce rates, and more people wanting to foster. So to me, that is a project that I'm proudest of because, I've done a lot of design work for corporate impact. And while that's been great, design for social impact is actually what I'm most passionate about. I just went from seeing foster parents who previously were on the website just be completely lost. They're like, how do I contact this agency? What do I do? I mean, it was very confusing to just find what you're looking for, and then to show them the redesign, and they loved it. And they're like, wow, I feel so comfortable. I feel like I am more informed. That's really just goes to show that power of design. And I think not only just, I think this project showed the power of design when you use it for a social good, but I think it was my truest expression of compassion for people who really need it the most. I see it as like design for social impact is like that vehicle for, I guess, spreading my passion. And I would say the Angels foster care work was definitely an inspiration to even the startup I'm doing now. It's called Empathy. I realize I never gave it a name.
Is it up? Is it up now or is it not ready?
It's not ready, but we're working on the prototype. We're working on a proof of concept. You can go on Empathy. It's EMPATHIE. Empathy in English was taken, so I did empathy in French. This was a class project. I had like no time to pick the name, so that's how I found it, but it's empathie.care. Yeah, and you'll see like a lot of my work kind of has like the same theme of like, yes, we say empathy and that's an expectation as designers, but really I think when you work with marginalized communities, you come from maybe a tough background, you just, I don't know, it just makes your heart really big and you want to fight for the people that you're designing for. And I think even though this social impact stuff is totally unrelated to things that people probably care more about, which is like, oh, my experience at Dropbox. I mean, it has everything to do with my experience at Dropbox. I fought pretty hard to advocate for users at Dropbox, carried my big heart into everything that I did there, whether it was just working for people or just fighting for certain projects to get done. So that's kind of how I want to talk about my experience with design. I don't want it to be just really focused on like, oh, you got this offer from here and this offer from here. Really, who are you as a designer and how is that embedded in everything that you do in all of your projects? How do you carry yourself in everything that you do?
I'm just on the Empathy website. It's really nice.
Thank you. You did it like overnight.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yes, quite some all-nighters for these things.
I'll put this in like the show notes so everyone can see. But continuing on, where do you see your future in design? Do you like doing more of the social impact? Are you gonna work on this app for a while? Where do you see yourself for the next 5 years?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll say I don't think I've ever had a 5-year plan. And I think like every year or two, something kind of changes. I mean, for example, I think for the longest time, I just wanted to work for like a quote unquote top tech company for design or something. And I thought that was the end all be all. And then I don't know, it's always changing. I would say I've tried to focus on following my heart and following my values. And I guess that's why I think in 5 years, I want to keep working on this. I myself, I wouldn't say like my mental health is really related to me being like Asian American, because there was a point in time where I didn't live with Asian American people. But I mean, a lot of my background in foster care affects my mental health. And I think it very much parallels to people who are racial minorities, different upbringing, but yet there's still the impact of upbringing. And I think because of that, I just like, I want to take this as far as I can and use design as just like one way to help me get there. In 5 years, I hope that I can actually reach more marginalized communities besides racial minorities, maybe like LGBTQ, definitely foster youth, people with disabilities. And maybe if you want to go crazier, I think it'd be amazing to reach an international audience. And that would be interesting to design for that too, which I did have experience at Dropbox designing for internationally. A lot to consider, different cultures, languages, and eventually support multiple languages and just try to just make mental wellness not just a thing in America, not just a thing for a small group of people, but for really everybody who just, I don't know, is not really getting the help they need. That's where I see myself in 5 years, I guess, trying to work on this and do those things.
Amazing. What is something you want to see more of in the design field?
I would say something more of in the design field. I think that's something that I've noticed throughout my career. And I think even for my own, other people's careers, my own career, I think that it's hard to advocate for design when there's always such a huge push about like business impact, revenue. I experienced that a lot at Dropbox. I mean, I mentioned that I worked on Dropbox Sharing. So huge revenue driver, huge engagement drivers. It's a lot of metrics.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think we were a little focused more on that than user impact. I want to see more people like fight against the status quo. That was one of my last projects that I worked on at Dropbox, was to push against that status quo. Like, can we find alternative ways to better balance user and business needs? Don't just succumb to like whatever the status quo is and just not make the effort to fight back. I think it's just very easy to get defeated and say like, this is how it is at this company. I think we need more fighters. And it's easy to get jaded. Really, it is. That project's in my portfolio if anyone cares to see. It's the latest one. I think we need more of that in the industry. And I think even myself, when I was earlier in my career, I think I was just naive and thinking like, oh, like we should do this project as it's good for the users. And I think there's a way to try to understand what all your stakeholders want and try to influence them. Can't just kind of bombard them with like, let's do this project because it helps users, right? I mean, I think there needs to be, I guess, empathetic ways of working with the people that you do work with. I mean, all of this is really tough. I think that's just like the point of being a designer, right? Like trying to balance both. But I just think I want to encourage people to not give up, but that there is hope.
What is your best words of wisdom or advice for someone looking to be a designer?
Yeah, I would say the best thing that you can do is really focus on intention. I think people get so sucked into I need a job, so I need to create this thing in my portfolio and I need to do X, Y, and Z. I mean, honestly, like I don't think people really care about the steps. It's as much as they do about how did you transition from step to step and like why did you do that. Like help me understand like what's going on inside your brain, like what is your rationale behind something, because I think there just isn't enough. I mean, people kind of go into this field thinking that's like you create a portfolio and that's it, and it's like so much more. If you want to be prepared for the things that I've mentioned already, which is like you're going to need to work with stakeholders that are going to prioritize all other things over user impact. Just doing the steps in the UX design process is not going to influence them. There's a lot more to it than just doing the steps. So really think about why, really connect it back to the research. And most of all, I know it sounds so simple, but probably like 99% of portfolios don't do this. Actually articulate the user problem. Be super clear about it. Like saying something like, we need to fix this site. That is a solution. That is not a problem, right? And so when you come to people with a solution, don't be surprised if they don't want to work on your project that you're proposing. That's an example of how you don't have influence because you're not getting the problem across. It's not fully understood because of the way you framed it.
What is the most underrated part about being a designer?
The most underrated part. I would say, I think it depends I guess it depends on the designer, but I assume that you're probably talking to people who are just starting out in their careers or trying to break in. So I would say the part that is extremely underrated is the part about presenting your work. Like if you talk to people who have been in the design industry for a couple years, they will probably all unanimously tell you that design is about communication. It's about selling your designs. Someone made a joke, like someone at Capital One I think Capital One said like a lot of her job is just like arguments with her team or like debates. I'm like, yeah, that pretty much is. What I think is overrated for people getting into design is this focus on Figma. And don't get me wrong, I love Figma. I am a diehard Figma fan. There's just like, it's so overrated to pick up these Figma skills. I'm not saying they're not important, but I think people don't realize that if you can't explain your designs and why you did it and present it well, it's just going to look like a bunch of squares and boxes to people.
So lastly, what do you want to be known for?
I want to be known as someone who truly strives to be as compassionate as possible to the people that I interact with. And striving to be the most compassionate, I guess, can mean a lot of things, but I want to be known for being a fighter, like that I fight for people who just aren't getting what they need. I mean, I don't know, let's say I end up working for another company. I want to be known as a person who fights really hard for the users that I'm serving. I think from like I guess a social justice route or social impact route. I want to be known for that. I want to fight against the status quo. I want to create change. I want to be a change maker. Because to me, that means success. If I can create as much change as I can in the world, that would make me happy.
Amazing. I love how passionate about you are, that you can still be a designer but also like help so many people, because you wouldn't like normally think that people in design help people. It just seems like, oh, you do like the websites and that type of stuff.
Yeah, actually, I would say most people I talk to think that design is about helping people if you're in the design field.
Mm-hmm. So to end, can you tell everyone, where they can find you, if you have a website or LinkedIn or an Instagram?
Yeah. So my LinkedIn is a good place to find me. It's linkedin.com/in/Jen Wong, and it's JENWONG. My Instagram is Jennifer_Y_Wong. And then my portfolio is jenniferywong.com. So Jennifer with 2 N's, 1 F. Yeah, pretty much says my name over and over again. But I guess if you find my portfolio, it will tell you all the links.
Yeah. Okay. I'll link it also in the description notes. But thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on your podcast today.